I was the co-founder and minority shareholder, the one who bled for this company and dragged our performance to the top of the industry. So when the majority shareholder's wife, a pampered influencer type who seemed to have never worked a day in her life, was brought in as the new head of HR, I figured it was a minor annoyance. That is, until she started bragging in a private online group. We have this amazing role that gets 8 male applicants for every 1 female. I just made sure the final hires were a perfect 1-to-1 ratio. You're welcome, ladies. I took the post to the majority shareholder, my best friend, Mark. He just shrugged. The company's doing fine, isn't it? Don't be so sensitive. Right then, I knew the company was doomed. Our goal for the next decade is to become the ones who define this industry. The words had barely left my lips before the room erupted in thunderous applause. The camera flashes were blinding. I stood in the spotlight at our annual summit, looking out at a sea of faces flushed with excitement, my own heart swelling with pride. This company was something Mark Peterson, my best friend, and I had built from nothing, starting in a cramped, dingy office. Today, we had shattered our own performance records, becoming the brightest, rising star in the tech world. Just as the energy in the room peaked, Mark walked on stage and took the microphone. He had a young woman with him, beautiful and dressed in a flowing white dress that was completely out of place at a corporate event. It was his new wife, Chloe Vance. Thank you all, and a special thanks to my brother, Leo Hayes. Mark threw an arm around my shoulder before turning back to the crowd. I also have one more announcement to make today. My wife, Chloe, will be officially joining the company as our new head of human resources. A moment of silence, then an even louder explosion of applause and whistles. I felt my brow furrow for a split second before I smoothed it over. HR was a support department. As long as they followed procedure, it didn't matter who was in charge. It was a favor to Mark, and I had to grant it. I forced a smile and led the applause, and just like that, it was settled. I thought it was just a harmless, trivial event. A week later, our director of engineering, Frank, burst into my office, his face a mask of panic. Leo, that senior engineer we poached from our competitor. Why was his offer rejected? I had him locked in. We need him to put out fires like yesterday. I immediately pulled up the HR portal. The final step in the approval workflow was stamped with a glaring red denied. In the reason for rejection field, there was a single line of elegant, cursive text. Candidate's astrological sign is Virgo, which clashes with the department's energy. My hand froze on a mouse. For a long moment, I didn't move. I thought I had to be hallucinating. Over the next few days, the tone on the company's internal Slack channels started to get weird. In threads where veteran employees were discussing their work, a few newly registered accounts would pop up with snarky comments. It's 2025, who still believes in hustle culture? Drop the dinosaur act. Heard one of the departments is all male. Way too much testosterone in there. No wonder they have no creative spark. A strange sense of unease began to creep over me. It all came to a head when a female manager I'd promoted sent me a screenshot in the middle of the night. It was from a private Facebook group for women. The poster was Chloe Vance. Sisters, since I took over HR, the gender scales of the company are finally tipping in our favor. To screen out another batch of mediocre, cocky guys today. Feeling great. The accompanying photo was of her delicate hands feeding a thick stack of resumes into a shredder. The word male was clearly visible on the cover page of the top resume. In the background, a mountain of resumes marked for disposal was piled high, at least 100 of them. A chill ran down my spine. Phone in hand, I practically kicked open the door to Mark's office. Look at this. Look at what your wife is doing. I shoved the screen in his face. This will destroy the company's foundations. Mark, we're a tech company. Talent is our lifeblood. Mark looked stunned at first, then he took the phone and actually chuckled. He stood up and clapped me heavily on the shoulder. Leo, come on. You're making a big deal out of nothing. He handed the phone back, his tone dismissive. Chloe's just trying to inject some new energy into the company. Shake things up. Look how lively the company's Slack is now. The atmosphere is great, isn't it? Seeing the shock on my face, he added, don't be such a dinosaur. Dinosaur. The word stuck in my chest like a thorn. My warning didn't just fall on deaf ears. It became Chloe's new mandate. The next day, a company-wide email went out. The subject line was Embracing Diversity for Proactive Equity. The body was a long-winded tirade filled with all the latest buzzwords, but the core message was simple. To increase the proportion of female employees, hiring would now prioritize female candidates. It was signed, Chloe Vance, Human Resources. In her new world, fairness had become a joke. The Public Relations Department got the first taste of this new energy. They were working on a $1 million project with a notoriously difficult client, a self-made Texas millionaire, a classic good old boy. He was crass, loved to make off-color jokes, and insisted on doing business over drinks. Chloe personally interviewed and hired 3 recent art school graduates, a trio of influencer types for the account. At the kickoff meeting, the client, true to form, made a slightly inappropriate joke. One of the new hires instantly threw her glass of water in his face. "You chauvinist pig. Who do you think you are?" The project was dead on arrival. When the news reached me, I was reviewing code for the engineering department. I grabbed the senior PR manager, and we were on the next flight to Dallas. I spent the next 2 days apologizing, smiling through gritted teeth, and drinking enough whiskey to give myself an ulcer. We slept on a couch in the hotel lobby, got doors slammed in our faces, and were ignored for 48 hours straight. Finally, I got him to listen. I showed him the design sketches for our very first product and told him our origin story. When I finished, he was silent for a long time, chain-smoking one cigarette after another. "Leo," he finally said, "I respect you. You're a stand-up guy." He signed a contract. I returned to the office feeling like a wreck. At the project postmortem, I made only one comment. In public relations, the first things you have to learn are emotional control and professional conduct. The moment the words were out, the eyes of the 3 new hires turned red. "Are you saying it was wrong for us to defend our dignity? Who even does this customer is always right routine anymore? That's some classic boomer mansplaining. Shouldn't you be reflecting on the client's behavior, Leo? Why are you blaming us, the victims?" Chloe sat beside them, gently patting their backs and handing them tissues. She looked at me with a hint of reproach, as if I were the villain. I stared at the absurd scene, speechless. The thorn in my chest dug deeper. A few days later, David Miller, a project manager who'd been with me for 5 years, knocked on my door. I had trained him myself. He was technically brilliant and rock-solid reliable. Now, his eyes were bloodshot, and he was clutching a resignation letter. "Leo, I'm sorry. I didn't take the letter. I just asked him why." His lips trembled, but he couldn't speak. I found out later that a new female colleague had submitted a project proposal that was a complete mess. David had pointed out several critical flaws during a team meeting. The next day, a post appeared on the company Slack. "Let's talk about that predatory manager in engineering who preys on new hires." The post painted David as a tyrant who suppressed new talent, stole ideas, and even engaged in workplace harassment. Several new female employees commented on the thread, tearfully confirming the accusations. He had no way to defend himself. I looked at David, a man in his late 20s, with tears welling up in his eyes. "I'm leaving, Leo. This place. I can't work here anymore." His resignation letter felt like a knife in my heart. The company's quarterly performance report started to look like an EKG in cardiac arrest. The red line plunged downwards, sharp and cold. I took the report and David's resignation letter and walked into Mark's office for the 3rd and final time. I slammed them on his desk. "Mark, your wife is going to bankrupt this company. How long are you going to play dumb?" He didn't even look at the documents. He just frowned at me. "Leo, maybe your management style is too aggressive? I've seen the comments on Slack. They say you can't tolerate new ideas." He paused, a hint of annoyance in his voice. "Chloe told me you've been targeting her, undermining her from the start. We're all trying to do what's best for the company. Why can't you just be a team player?" In that instant, my blood ran cold. I looked at this man, this brother, who was suddenly a complete stranger, and I laughed. What's best for the company?" I picked up the documents from his desk, turned around, and walked out without looking back. I knew that he and I, and the company we had built with our bare hands, were finished. I saw the article on a tech industry blog. How Nexus Innovations co-founder, Leo Hayes, ran a star company into the ground with his toxic ego. The article was written with professional precision. It had a photo of me frowning in a meeting with the caption, "A tyrant who refuses to listen to any other opinion." There was a picture of me raising a glass with a client at dinner, the poster child for a toxic, booze-fueled business culture that bows to capital. They even had a photo of me eating instant ramen at my desk late at night, captioned, "The mastermind of a fake hustle culture designed to guilt-trip employees into burnout." The writing style, the framing of the photos, I recognized it immediately. It was the work of the influencer squad Chloe had personally hired for the PR department. Their words were sharper than any knife. My phone buzzed nonstop with links from colleagues, followed by cautious inquiries about how I was doing. I didn't reply. This time, there was no anger, no kicking down doors. I calmly saved a link to the article. Then, I printed the last 3 months of performance reports, the downward sloping curve looking like an ugly scar. I took out David Miller's resignation letter, and I found a screenshot of Chloe's post from that private Facebook group. Finally, I took all of it, every last piece of evidence, and laid it out neatly on Mark's desk. It felt like arranging a final meal for a man on death row. Mark, I looked at him calmly. It's the company or it's your wife. Pick one. His face shifted through a series of expressions as he glanced at the documents. He didn't answer me. He just picked up his phone. Notify all board members. Meeting in 30 minutes. The atmosphere in the boardroom was suffocating. I sat in my chair and watched Mark stand up. I thought this was it, the final showdown. I thought he would at least remember the days we hauled a propane tank up the stairs of our walk-up apartment to stay warm while writing the first lines of our code. But the first words out of his mouth sent me plunging into an abyss. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure you've all seen the recent online discussions regarding our own Leo Hayes. He paused, scanning the room. In my view, while some of the posts may be extreme, they are not without merit. My heart sank. The recent decline in our performance is clear to everyone. As a core member of our leadership team, Leo, you bear an undeniable management responsibility for this. I stared at him, this man to whom I once would have trusted my life. There was no guilt in his eyes, no conflict, only a kind of greed and urgency I had never seen before. Chloe, no, power, had turned him into someone else entirely. He continued, his voice low but every word a dagger. Leo, you've been with me for years. You must be tired. The company needs new blood, a new management philosophy. He adopted a patronizing, fatherly tone. How about this? You step back, take on an advisory role. Stop worrying about the day-to-day. Your shares, your dividends, you won't lose a single penny. You could just relax and enjoy your wealth. Wouldn't that be nice? The room was dead silent. Every eye was on me. I laughed. Not a bitter laugh, not a cold one. I laughed because it was genuinely, utterly absurd. I looked at Mark's face, etched with false concern, as if I were watching the comedy of the year. I slowly stood up and straightened my collar. Okay, I said. Just one word. Mark was visibly taken aback, clearly not expecting me to agree so easily. I looked him straight in the eye and said, slowly and clearly, I'm done. The triumphant joy in his eyes was almost overflowing, though he tried to mask it with a somber expression. I glanced around the boardroom, my gaze finally landing back on Mark. And since that's the case, and to avoid interfering with the company's new blood and new philosophy, I paused, watching the light in his eyes grow brighter, and then I dropped the bomb. I have decided to sell my entire stake in the company. The moment I finished, the air in the room seemed to solidify. The joy on Mark's face froze into a comical, slack-jawed stupor. He had probably prepared 1,000 arguments to convince me to think of the bigger picture, but he never imagined I would just flip the whole table over. Leo, don't be impulsive. He was the first to recover, his voice cracking. The company's numbers are down right now. If you sell your shares at this point, you'll take a massive loss. We're brothers. I can't let you do that. He looked heartbroken, a masterful performance of sincerity. But I could clearly see, beneath that facade, a flame of insatiable greed dancing in his eyes. I just smiled, saying nothing as I gathered my few documents from the table. He got desperate, rushing around the table to grab my hand. Leo, let's talk this through. Don't throw a tantrum. I pulled my hand away. I'm not throwing a tantrum, Mark. I'm just tired. I want to rest. I picked up my coffee mug and headed for the door. I paused just before leaving and turned back. For the sake of our years of friendship, let me give you one last piece of advice. I looked at him, my tone as placid as if I were discussing the weather. Be careful your little influencers don't burn the place down. A company isn't their fan club. It can't handle that kind of drama. His face darkened instantly. The anger of being seen through was so strong, he couldn't even be bothered to pretend anymore. You know what, Leo? You're just petty. Deep down, you've always looked down on women. He waved his hand dismissively. Don't worry. The company will be even better in my hands. Right? So much better. The share transfer agreement was drawn up quickly. The price Mark offered was a full 30% below market value. While feigning sympathy, it's a tough market, brother, I'm sorry, he was rushing the legal team, terrified I might change my mind. I stared at the thin document, my mind on a different calculation entirely. I picked up the pen, feigning hesitation. Mark, that new employment contract template Chloe submitted and that gender priority hiring plan. You really can't sign off on those. I gave him one last look, a final attempt. The clauses in there are poison. His entire focus was on the pen in my hand and the agreement on the table. He nodded distractedly. Yeah, I'll look at it. His eyes were already locked on the signature line. I said no more. The nib of the pen met the paper a soft, scratching sound. Leo Hayes. 2 words that ended an era. I dropped the pen on the table and walked away without a shred of regret. Stepping out of the building, the afternoon sun was harsh. I squinted, and my phone vibrated in my pocket. A text alert. A massive wire transfer had just been deposited into my account. I smiled. Meanwhile, in the CEO's office on the top floor, Chloe was nestled in Mark's arms, looking at the signed share transfer agreement and laughing hysterically. He actually sold? I thought he had more of a spine than that. He's just a dinosaur, doesn't even realize he's been left behind by the times, Mark said, pulling her closer with a smug grin. From now on, this company is ours. Chloe pushed a stack of documents in front of him, her voice sickeningly sweet. Honey, here are the new contracts and hiring announcements I drafted. Sign them quickly so we can really get to work and clear out all the old toxic guys. Mark didn't even glance at them. He picked up a pen and scrawled his name with a flourish. He had no idea. He had no idea that those documents contained some of the most outrageous contract clauses and a compensation structure designed to bankrupt the company. Any single one of them was enough to drag the company into a legal nightmare from which it would never recover. And I was standing across the street, looking up at the building I had poured nearly a decade of my life into. Then I made a call. Hello, David? It's me. I'm starting a new company. You and all the other guys who got pushed out. Are you interested in joining? My revenge was just getting started. The line was silent for 3 full seconds. Leo? You're out. David's voice held a barely perceptible tremor and an anger he couldn't suppress. Yeah, I'm out. They pushed you. I sold my shares. I cut him off, my voice calm. You sold them? His voice shot up, followed by a dead silence. I could picture his expression. Shock, confusion, maybe even disappointment. Leo, what were you thinking? That was I started a new company. Are you in or out? Another silence. This time, it ended with a surge of raw, uncontainable excitement. In. Hell yes, I'm in. If it weren't for you, I'd probably still be hauling drywall on some construction site. Good. Get in touch with all the old crew who got driven out. I'm buying everyone coffee tomorrow. Done. The next day, in the private room of a coffee shop on the west side of town, the air was thick with tension. There were 7 of them, all familiar faces who had been optimized, downsized, or let go for not embracing change by Chloe. There was David, the tech lead, Frank, the ace market strategist, Chris, the operations guru. Every one of them had been a formidable talent in their own right. Now, they looked at me with a mix of confusion, hope, and the dazed expression of someone who's just been pulled from a scrap heap. I didn't waste time with small talk. I pushed copies of the new company's registration and my share transfer agreement to the center of the table. I sold my stake. The money's in the bank. The new company is registered. It's called Aurora Tech. As in the dawn, I have only one goal: to build a better product faster than them and take back the market we created. I looked at each of them. I'm taking 51%. The other 49% is for the 7 of you to divide based on contribution. The room was silent, save for the sound of heavy breathing. Frank's hand trembled as he lifted his coffee cup, spilling a few drops. Leo, what are you? I'm not your boss anymore. I'm Leo. I corrected him. Before, we were working for Mark. Now, we work for ourselves. Let's do it. David was the first to stand, slamming his fist on the table so hard the cups rattled. I've had enough of this crap. Every damn meeting was about feelings, emotional validation, and the female advantage in the workplace. Nobody ever talked about the product, about the data. Damn right. Chris, the operations guy, his eyes red with anger, chimed in. I'm a grown man, and they forced me to write marketing copy in the style of an Instagram influencer. I wanted to puke. All our clients were about to walk, and that influencer squad was in the office trying to organize a group bite for afternoon tea, calling it a company wellness upgrade. Frank spat on the floor. Idiots. Years of pent-up frustration erupted in that room. There were no outsiders here, only a band of misfits kicked to the curb by an absurd reality. They cursed, they laughed, and finally, their eyes all focused back on me. It was the look of a flame being rekindled. Leo, they said, just tell us what to do, and we'll do it. Less than a week later, the core team of Aurora Tech was assembled. We rented a cheap space in a startup incubator. The office was bare, furnished with nothing but desks and chairs, but everyone's eyes were shining. David and 2 other programmers had covered a whiteboard with the architecture for a new product, their excitement palpable like we were back in the very beginning. Frank was on the phone day and night. The moment his old clients heard his name and mine, they promised to support us as soon as our product was ready. Everyone worked like a well-oiled machine. There was no micromanaging, no one cracking a whip. Each person was trying to squeeze 48 hours out of a 24-hour day. On Friday night, while we were all eating takeout, David suddenly spun his laptop around. Leo, you got to see this. I'm dying. On the screen was the latest job posting from Nexus Innovations. Hiring, Director of Marketing, 1 position, requirements. Female, under 35, polished appearance and strong personal brand. Must be a power user of Instagram, possess a keen insight into female consumer psychology, and have a deep, critical perspective on contemporary mansplaining culture. Additional notes. Candidates must submit a handwritten career plan. Applicants with neat, elegant handwriting will be given priority. The office fell silent for a second, then erupted into hysterical laughter. Holy crap! Are they hiring a director or a trophy wife? Neat handwriting? I should just submit my resume in calligraphy. You have to admit, they're masters of recruiting. This is how you perfectly filter out every single sane person from the applicant pool. I looked at the ridiculous job posting and laughed too. I pulled out my phone, opened my banking app, and stared at the long string of cold, hard numbers in my account. Then, I looked up and out the window. The Nexus Innovations building wasn't far, its lights blazing. I knew that inside, a spectacular firework was about to be lit. All I had to do was find a good seat and enjoy the show. 2 weeks later, a business news headline blew up the internet. Massive scandal at Nexus Innovations. PR director allegedly embezzles company funds to bankroll celebrity pop star. The article included a leaked internal contract and several screenshots of chat logs. The story was simple. A rising pop star's official endorsement fee was $3 million. But the PR department at Nexus, run by a few of the star's diehard fans, had managed to negotiate the contract up to $10 million. The extra $7 million was officially earmarked for promotional expenses, but in reality, it was being used to artificially boost the celebrity's album sales and social media stats. Using company money to fund their stan obsession, they had taken it to a whole new level. The news broke, and public outrage was immediate. When the market opened, Nexus Innovations stock immediately hit a limit down. I was in the middle of a UI design discussion with David and the team when Frank's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his entire body went rigid. Holy! He held out his phone. The Aurora Tech office fell silent. A few seconds later, ah ha 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 ha, David laughed so hard he nearly fell out of his chair, tears streaming down his face. Reverse negotiation. No, wait, this is for negotiation. This move, I call it a work of art. $10 million, just to make some noise for their idol? That's not a company. That's a fan club's private treasury. Chris, our operations guy, was laughing and shaking his head. These girls know how to spend money. I'll give them that. They just don't know how to earn it. All our pent-up anger transformed into pure, cathartic laughter. I saw a picture in the article of Mark, looking haggard and overwhelmed as he was mobbed by reporters. I didn't laugh. I just thought the fireworks are even bigger and brighter than I expected. Just then, my phone began to vibrate violently. The screen lit up with 2 words, Mark Peterson. I walked over to the window and answered, Leo. It was Mark's voice, strained and cracking, almost unrecognizable. Help me. The company is finished. I said nothing, just listened to his incoherent pleas. It was Chloe. It was all those lunatics she hired. They treated the company like their personal piggy bank. $10 million. That was our R&D budget. He had finally found someone to blame, his voice filled with regret and deflection. Leo, we're brothers. You can't just watch me burn. Come back, please. The company is yours again. I'll give you back the shares. No, I'll give them to you for free. His voice on the other end of the line was pathetic, groveling in the dust. I looked out the window. Our little office, as Spartan as it was filled with people glowing with a shared purpose. Meanwhile, the skyscraper that once symbolized our dream was now teetering on the brink of collapse. Mark, I finally said, my voice as calm as still water. A few days ago, I took a look at your employee roster. His frantic pleading stopped short. How many people do you have left who can actually write code? Who's left that can go out, meet with clients, and actually close a deal? Tell me, the number of male employees you have. Is it even 10% of your staff? With every question I asked, the breathing on the other end of the line grew heavier. Tell me, Mark, if I came back, who would I be relying on? Your squad of influencers who understand emotional validation and the female advantage. Are you going to send them to discuss technical specs with a client? Or have them try to fix a server that's being attacked by the entire internet? I paused, then delivered the final blow. You personally ripped out the company's skeleton piece by piece. Now all that's left is an empty skin. Not even a god can save you now. I hung up the phone and blocked his number. The world was quiet again. Back in the office, the laughter had subsided. David and the others were looking at me, their eyes burning with something hot. I turned back to them and pointed at the product architecture on the whiteboard. Stop watching the show. Get back to work. Our time is just beginning. Bad news travels fast, especially when it's this entertaining. The tipping point came from a well-known HR professionals group on LinkedIn. Frank had been a lurker there for years, and now he held up his phone like Columbus discovering the new world. Everyone, latest battlefield report. In the group, an anonymous HR manager was in the middle of a frantic rant. Help! Does anyone know a good labor lawyer? A third of the female employees at my company all submitted their maternity leave requests in the same month. They're all new hires, only been here a few months. Their contracts are insane. Not only is it fully paid leave, but they also get a massive special talent retention bonus that's paid out during the leave. A stream of WTF and "you're kidding me" followed in the comments. Someone asked, "What kind of magical company is this? Are they still hiring? I have friends who are trying to get pregnant." The HR manager replied with a crying emoji. The company's cash flow is about to snap. The CEO hasn't shown his face in 3 days. In our office, the silence was followed by a roar of laughter, even louder than the last time. Special talent retention bonus? Huh, I thought that was something you give to Nobel laureates. This sounds more like a targeted charity program for expectant mothers. Chloe Vance is a business genius. She wasn't running a company. She was running a non-profit. David was slapping his thigh, tears of laughter in his eyes. He turned to me. "Leo, this was the hiring plan and the employment contract you told Mark not to sign, wasn't it?" Every eye in the room instantly locked onto me. I nodded, taking a sip of my now-cold tea. I told him back then, if he signed that contract, the company wouldn't belong to us anymore. It would belong to the Department of Labor. The laughter in the room slowly died down, replaced by a complex cocktail of relief and vicarious satisfaction. They looked at me differently now. If before it was the excitement of reunion and hope for the future, now it was something closer to awe. They finally understood that I wasn't just being a doomsayer or a dinosaur spouting old-school advice. I had simply foreseen the avalanche. And what triggers an avalanche is never the last snowflake. It's every single one. The final, fatal blow came quietly, without any drama, but it was more deadly than anything that had come before. The next day, a press release from a law firm began to circulate online. The client, Ms. Chloe Vance. The message was concise. Due to her husband Mark Peterson's mismanagement of their company, the couple had developed irreconcilable differences regarding the future of the business, and their marriage had completely broken down. Ms. Vance had officially filed for divorce and requested a court order to freeze their marital assets. At the very end of the statement was a carefully worded sentence. All decisions made by Ms. Chloe Vance during her tenure at Nexus Innovations were executed with the signed authorization of the company's CEO, Mr. Mark Peterson, and were part of her official duties. She had washed her hands of the whole affair. Frank finished reading, threw his phone on the table, and swore. That is one stone-cold wish. Chris sighed. They weren't a married couple. They were a world-class risk management team. He was right. She lit the fuse herself, but just before the explosion, she jumped ship in the most elegant way possible. And on her way out, she kicked the last remaining floorboard out from under Mark's feet. I didn't say a word. I just deleted every news alert and stock tracker related to Nexus Innovations from my phone. I stood up, walked to the whiteboard, and picked up the pen. All right, everyone. The comedy is over. I turned to face my 7 brothers, the fire in their eyes burning brighter than ever. It's our turn to take the stage. 7 men, crammed into an office of less than 500 square feet. The air was thick with the smell of code and something called ambition. The whiteboard was now a dense forest of lines and notes detailing our product architecture. David was in a heated debate with another programmer over the most efficient algorithm. Chris was on the phone with distributors, his voice growing hoarse from back-to-back calls. And Frank was still in that HR group, our faithful war correspondent. His phone was our command center. New update. Frank's voice cut through the noise, and the office fell silent. All eyes shot toward him. Mark is trying to back out of the contracts. Frank held up his phone for everyone to see. It was the anonymous HR manager again. Latest, CEO called a meeting with all department heads, ripped into the HR department for signing unequal treaties, and declared all paid maternity leave contracts and special bonuses null and void. Someone replied in the thread, and then, CEO for the win. The HR manager posted, "You're so naive" emoji. And then, the special talents slapped their employment contracts, the supplemental agreements, and the official Mark Peterson signed document titled "A Special Benefits Program to Enhance the Happiness and Sense of Belonging of Female Employees" right on his desk. Word is his signature on those documents was bigger and more flamboyant than anyone else's. No one in our office laughed this time. A strange, cold sense of satisfaction spread through the room. The real blowback was even more spectacular than I had imagined. The same group of influencers that Chloe had treated like royalty immediately turned on their benefactor the moment they realized their special talent retention bonus was at risk. They formed a Nexus Innovations Pregnant Victims Alliance on social media. They tearfully recounted how they had trusted the company's promises and chosen to start their families while working there. Now, the heartless capitalists were trying to abandon the very people who had contributed so much emotional value to the company. Their posts were heartbreaking, crafted to elicit maximum sympathy. They even organized a protest with signs outside the Nexus Innovations office building. Give U.S. our maternity leave. Give U.S. our money. Scumbag Mark Peterson, preying on pregnant women. The court of public opinion completely flipped. Just days ago, netizens were mocking Nexus as a fan club's private bank. Now, the narrative shifted to sympathy for the vulnerable pregnant women and outrage at the unscrupulous capitalist. They used the very weapons Chloe had taught them to use, and they dealt Mark the most devastating blow. Chris stared at the news on his phone, amazed. Wow, these women are the real marketing geniuses. They can turn black into white, instantly swapping the roles of victim and perpetrator. I'm genuinely impressed. Frank scoffed. That's nothing. Look at this. He pulled up the latest press release from Chloe's legal team. In it, Ms. Chloe Vance was portrayed as a poor, helpless woman who had been subjected to long-term psychological manipulation by her husband, forced to sign documents she didn't understand. All of her official duties were carried out under Mark's intense pressure and coercion. The statement was accompanied by a diagnosis from a professional psychiatrist stating that Ms. Vance was suffering from moderate depression. The date of diagnosis? Shortly after she started working at Nexus. David buried his face in his arms, his shoulders shaking. I couldn't tell if he was laughing or trembling at the sheer madness of the world. What is she trying to do now? Chris asked, confused. Painting herself as a victim too? What's the angle? I walked to the whiteboard and picked up the eraser. I wiped away every last note about Nexus Innovations, slowly, deliberately, until the board was clean. The angle. I turned to face them. She's telling those pregnant employees to sue Mark and to sue him for everything he's worth. When Mark is ruined and the company is liquidated as primary creditors, they'll get every penny they're owed. And as for her, not only does she escape all liability, but she gets to play the victim and walk away with an even bigger piece of the pie in the divorce settlement. The office was completely silent, except for the cool autumn breeze blowing through the open window. I dropped the eraser back in its tray and picked up a black marker. In the very center of the whiteboard, I wrote 4 words, clear and bold. Aurora Tech. All right. I capped the pen, my voice quiet but reaching every corner of the room. Their show is over. Ours is about to begin. Aurora, the name of the dawn. When this star rises in the east, it signals the end of a long night and the coming of the light. It was the perfect name for our new company. The whiteboard no longer held a single trace of Nexus Innovations. In its place were our products, our clients, our future. We didn't bother trying to poach anyone from Nexus. We simply sent our product white paper and a beta test invitation to all of their core clients. We said nothing, yet we said everything. The next day, Chris's phone blew up. The first call was from the CEO of Nexus's largest client, an old-school manufacturing firm. His voice was filled with the relief of a man who had just survived a disaster. Leo, it's about time you guys came back. That idiot Mark Peterson, he was still bragging to us last week about his female employee happiness index. I was about to have a happiness-induced aneurysm. The project is stalled, the data is a mess, and the account managers have been replaced 3 times. All of them pregnant. We're not renewing our contract. Your new product will be the first to sign. 1, 2, 3. The clients Mark had once paraded around as his prized possessions were now fleeing Nexus like it was a plagued ship, and they were all flocking to us. Did we pull the rug out from under him? No. We just built a sturdier ark in the middle of a biblical flood. And we only saved seats for those who were clear-headed enough to see the storm coming. The last piece of news about Nexus came, as always, from Frank's HR group. The company was bankrupt, its assets liquidated. Computers, desks, printers, all sold off for scrap. As for the once celebrated Nexus Innovations brand and all its intellectual property, no takers. The auctioneer apparently called it 3 times to a silent room. It went unsold. Someone in the group posted a photo. In a dim parking garage, a man in a security guard's uniform was directing traffic. His back was stooped, his hair streaked with gray. It was Mark. In another feed, a business news alert popped up. Chloe Vance, arm in arm with a balding, older man, was smiling for the cameras at a charity gala. The headline read, "Prominent investor and new wife announce launch of female entrepreneurship fund." You see, the world is just that absurd. One person falls into hell, while another cashes in and reinvents themselves as an angel investor, lighting the way for others. I turn off my phone. None of it mattered anymore. 2 years later, the opening bell of the stock exchange rang at precisely 9:30 a.m. On the giant screen, under the bright red words Aurora Tech, the numbers began to fly. Opening price, $30. 3 seconds later, $35. 10 seconds later, $45. 1 minute later, it hit the limit up and stayed there, locked in. In our office, my 7 brothers stared at the screen, frozen as if petrified. The room was so quiet you could hear a heartbeat. Finally, David, with a trembling hand, opened his brokerage account on his laptop. He stared at the long string of zeros, rubbed his eyes, and looked again. Then this 6-foot-tall man, a tough guy from the Midwest, just broke down and cried. He wasn't the first. Chris's glasses were already fogged up. Frank turned to face the window, pretending to admire the view, but his shoulders were shaking. They weren't crying for the money. They were crying for the 2 years of sleepless nights. For the days spent crammed in that tiny office, eating instant ramen, fixing bugs, and making endless phone calls. For their trampled dignity and their doubted talent. They were crying for this victory, which had been far too long in coming. I walked over to the window and stood beside Frank. Below us, the city was alive with traffic, the sun shining brightly. A new era had begun. I took out my phone, found a number I hadn't contacted in 2 years, and sent a text message. Just 2 words. Thank you. Without his foolishness and betrayal, there would be no Aurora Tech. A minute later, my phone vibrated. It was a notification from my bank. I opened my mobile banking app, found his old, disconnected number, and sent a $10,000 credit to it. A final offering. An offering to the memory of our brotherhood, and to the memory of the era he had personally buried. That night, at the celebration dinner on the rooftop, the cool breeze felt good. The city lights twinkled below us like a river of stars. David was drunk, clinging to my arm, his words slurring. El Leo, tomorrow, I'm going to go buy a car. And then I'm driving back home to get my parents. No more living in that leaky old house for them. Frank held up his glass, his eyes red. My wife said, she said we can finally start trying for a baby. I clapped him on the shoulder and picked up my own glass. I looked around at this group of men, my brothers who had been through hell and back with me. The light in their eyes was brighter than any star in the sky tonight. I raised my glass. To all of you, the comedy is over. Our show is just beginning. 2 years after that day, the sun was shining. I was sitting in my office on the top floor of the Aurora Tech Tower. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows was the city's bustling financial district. The traffic flowed like a river, skyscrapers reaching for the clouds. The business empire I had built was at my feet. The intercom on my desk buzzed. It was the front desk. "Mr. Hayes, security is reporting a gentleman downstairs, a Mr. Peterson. He's asking to see you. He doesn't have an appointment." Peterson. The name now sounded like a relic from another century. I didn't have to ask which one. I didn't need to. I swiveled my leather chair to face the window. My gaze traveled past the buildings I once had to crane my neck to see, settling on the distant horizon. "Tell security," I said, my voice calm. "I'm not seeing any visitors today." "Yes, Mr. Hayes." The line clicked off. The world was quiet again. I thought that would be the end of it. 5 minutes later, the intercom buzzed again. This time it was the head of security, his voice hesitant. "Mr. Hayes, sorry to bother you. The man, he refuses to leave. He says he used to be your brother. He's begging you to come down and see him, for old times' sake." Old times. I picked up the coffee cup on my desk and took a sip. It was bitter than sweet. I didn't look down, but I could picture the scene perfectly. A disheveled, haggard man being held back at the entrance of a gleaming, modern skyscraper. He looked like a piece of trash someone had carelessly discarded, completely out of place with his surroundings. Pathetic. When he stabbed our brotherhood in the back for a woman. Did he think about old times then? When he greedily swallowed my shares and laughed with her about how stupid I was, did he think about old times? Now that he had nothing, he wanted to come to me and talk about old times. I set the cup down. The ceramic made a soft click against the polished wood of the desk. "Captain," I said. "Yes, Mr. Hayes." I looked out the window at the bright, energetic young faces streaming in and out of my company. At the massive Aurora Tech logo, shining brilliantly in the sun. Go down there and give him a message from me. Tell him. I paused, then spoke each word with perfect clarity. This company only hires based on merit. We don't care if you're a man or a woman.